Hello and welcome to the second episode of Franklin, my City Skyline series where we follow the development of the city of Franklin over time instead of making a huge city from scratch. Right now it's about 1650, so we got to talk about good old-fashioned European settler colonialism. Now everyone's heard of the classic colonial powers, the Spanish, the English, and the Belgians. European colonizers committed what was basically genocide to the vast majority of native peoples in the New World. They saw the land as unspoiled wilderness to be conquered and subjugated, and saw native peoples as part of that wilderness. This was primarily in pursuit of profit and profit alone. We will get to that soon. Our colonies will be based on those of New Sweden, the Swedish settlements in the mid-Atlantic, which existed from about 1638 to 1655 when the Dutch conquered them. However, this is a fictional series about a fictional city, so our fictionalized New Sweden will be called the colony of New Norway. Today we'll be building 3 forts and trading posts called Fort Hans, Fort Jens, and Fort Sven. Now, astute and knowledgeable viewers will note that Norway did not exist at this time. It was the Kingdom of Denmark and Norway. But we're going to ignore that since this is a fictional program full of fictional events. So what you see right now on the screen in front of you is me building Fort Sven. Fort Sven is the main settlement in the area. It's a simple bastion fort designed to eliminate dead spots. Dead spots being spots on a defensive rampart where defenders cannot hit attackers. Those were more common with circular fortifications, which were more common in the medieval times. So these are more commonly associated with large earthen and stone forts, which we'll build in a later episode. But today's fort is built with palisades. Those are those large wooden stakes you're looking at right now. These are more for power projection against other colonial powers in the area than to defend against the Lenape Native Americans, whose settlements we built in the previous episode. Of course, they're not designed to defend against the Lenape because, or they weren't used to defend against the Lenape because New Norway never quite got into the genocide portion of colonization before itself being colonized by other colonial powers. But anyway, need to build out the rest of this settlement. So what I'm building here are some agricultural fields. Now, some of these would have been European grains and crops like barley, wheat, some vegetables, alfalfa, which we use for hay. But of course we have a new crop as well, which is maize, which we usually call corn, which was originally grown by native cultures in Mexico in around 9000 BC. A lot of colonizers had an irrational belief that maize was unhealthy compared to European grains. It would turn them into savages, as they called the natives. But despite this, it grew so well in the new climate that it quickly became a staple crop for colonizers, and obviously remains one to this day. So anyway, let's name the district here, and what I'm going to build right about here is a couple more houses. These would have usually been made out of logs, but there wasn't something in the workshop that looked like this, so we got these more refined little Swedish cottages. And what I'm building here is a little common area in the settlement where anyone's livestock can go and graze. Just add in a little bit of grass here, and add in a couple other decals in the area just to give the land a little more character. Not everything is dirt. There's still some grass. People, care about their settlement a little bit. Build a couple roads leading out of town. We will flesh those out later a bit more. Add a couple stables in where people keep their horses and livestock, and a couple more permanent buildings over by the actual dock itself. And you notice I did not accurately place those cannons because I didn't know what I was doing at the time. When we do the big earthen fort later, I will be sure to place that accurately so I don't get angry messages from whatever City Skylines YouTube viewers who are also military geeks. Just put down a few more houses here. Basically, I'm going to be fleshing out this settlement and then moving on to the next one, which is going to be similar but smaller. And in the meantime, while I'm doing that, what we're going to do is we will talk about the economic system that underpinned European settler colonialism. That is, of course, mercantilism. So mercantilism was an economic system which arose in between feudalism and modern capitalism. There was no coherent contemporary mercantilist school of thought during this period. It was independent actors that came up with their own economic policies, but mostly they stemmed from a similar philosophy. All trade is a zero-sum game. That is to say, in each trade, someone wins and someone loses.
NAFTA is the worst trade deal maybe ever signed anywhere, but certainly ever signed in this country. And now,
or at best, both break even. Mercantilism then requires a series of policies to make sure your country is on the winning side of every trade every time. These typically included high tariffs on imported goods, forbidding colonies from trading with other nations, complete bans on the export of gold or silver, economically oppressing workers, that is, ensuring wages never rise above bare subsistence levels, and policies that ensure all raw materials in a nation should be put into productive use in that nation. International trade should be limited as much as possible to higher value finished goods rather than trade of raw materials. Now, this was the result of an economic situation very different from today. Fiat currency did not exist at the time. That is, currency which is based on a government promise rather than based on gold or silver bullion. So in order to increase the money supply in a country had to actually physically increase the amount of pure strain Ron Paul gold, kill your parents, owned by its citizens. So this is why gold and silver exports were banned or discouraged as much as possible, as any export led to a decrease in the money supply available to the citizens of a country. In addition, major restrictions on trade were enforced to advantage local merchants over foreign ones. Chief example of this was the Staple Port, which is a privileged city, usually on a river, where all passing ships were required to stop, unload, and present all goods for sale to the local population for a predetermined time defined by law before reloading and going on its way. Now, this could easily add 5 days to a journey, which exponentially increased the amount of time and money spent shipping goods. So this and the fact that colonies were prohibited typically from trading with anyone other than their parent nation were major reasons why smuggling and piracy were major concerns in the mercantilist era. We will talk more about smuggling and piracy in a future episode. It's the cool kind of piracy with the boats, not the boring kind on the internet. The economic oppression of workers was also an essential feature of the mercantilist system. Workers who were paid well could, of course, afford to occasionally stop working and have some recreational time. Sit around, have a beer, watch football, I don't know. But that, of course, reduces productivity and therefore the wealth of a nation. A mercantilist would call you lazy if you were only working 14 hours a day. Therefore, bare subsistence wages, that is to say, enough for you to get something to eat and maybe have a roof over your head, not a good roof over your head, were considered the most rational pay scale for farmers, miners, and other workers who extracted raw materials from nature to ensure that they were working from dawn till dusk 7 days a week, maximizing wealth generated for everyone in the nation, except, of course, for themselves. Which leads us to the function of colonies under the mercantilist system. They expanded the amount of land and thus the amount of resources available to a nation, thereby increasing its wealth. So the colonies we're building right now exist for one reason: to export goods and wealth to the colonial power, which in this case is Norway. These trading posts that we're building now trade clothing, tools, weapons, and of course beads for raw materials which the Lenape tribe are able to provide, like beaver pelts and other animal skins which are unavailable in Europe. And they also are probably growing and exporting a new cash crop, tobacco. Now, I think it's reasonable to ask, what's the great value in beaver pelts or tobacco compared to, say, a rifle that may be being traded for them? The answer is in the transportation costs. A beaver pelt is worth a lot more with the cost of transporting it to Europe factor in. Now, of course, even now, real fur is fairly expensive. But imagine if it also had to spend 6 weeks to 3 months on a boat crossing the Atlantic. And of course, it being 1650 or so, there's no real safety features on these boats. There's no guarantee it actually makes it to port. A lot of these boats sank. But once shipped, if they made it, these furs could be manufactured into more sophisticated goods, like clothing, and then traded to other countries. The added in value from long-distance transportation and skilled labor, fur clothing from the colonies could fetch a sizable price in the few open markets left in Europe. Furthermore, of course, tobacco simply wouldn't grow in most of Europe, but Europeans were developing smoking habits regardless, so a market for that was created. Now, what we're building here, and this is the second fort I am building right now, this is Fort Jens, is a representation of the earliest stage of mercantilist colonization. Frequently, the colonial power at this stage would actually seek the blessing of local tribes and build their trading posts. And initially, the trading relationships were largely amicable and even mutually beneficial. But of course, the mercantilist system explicitly rejects the concept of any trade deal being mutually beneficial. So we shall see how this relation is going to change in future episodes. So we're going to try something a little different here. I'm going to talk without a script for a bit. What I'm doing here is I'm enclosing some of the fields and I'm adding a district name, so we know this is Fort Jens. Now we've copied over some vegetation from elsewhere in the map so I can get that sort of unspoiled wilderness theme. Fill in with some more trees where I don't want to copy it over again. Add in some random vegetation everywhere, because not everywhere is perfectly manicured grass, despite what the game wants you to think. A little bit more here, sort of tidy up the coastline, make it look like a rocky shore. And we're going to grab some dirt, try and cover over this street where the ferry terminal is. I know probably not the most realistic for this era, but it looked better than any other ferry terminal I could find. Just add some grass, make it look a little overgrown. I mean, it's not a big settlement here. Fort Jens, they might not be taking care of it as well. Might not have clear-cut it as well either. And I think in a moment I'm going to grab some boats here, some little rowboats. You would have seen me place them earlier while I was talking about economics. These boats are for rowing out to where a big tall ship would be out in the river, and that's how you move all your goods and stuff out from the town into the boat, because it can't really come out to shore that well. Add some barrels and some crates and some carts. Wish there was a nice horse and cart somewhere on the workshop that I could have running around. but there isn't, so we're just not going to have any kind of vehicular traffic for a while in this series. Now we're going to start our final settlement. It's just a little trading post. No one even really lives here. It's called Fort Hans. Fort Hans, essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste the fortifications from one of the other one, and then we're going to sort of build it out a little bit here, because I'm, incredibly lazy about this entire series. God forbid I put any kind of effort into, literally anything. Build another ferry terminal. I'm going to set up a route with some old-timey boats going up and down. Build this building here that's sort of like, where the guy who runs the fort lives. I don't know if that would be I don't know what the particular term for that would be. Probably a commander or something. And there's probably like actual military ranks. Take out some of the props. I'm going to add a watchtower so you can, spot people coming from far off. And we added a couple houses, but we're not going to go crazy. We're going to say there's an overland link between these two forts. That's not probably going to be used as much as the marine route, of course. Just add some dirt here. And get some more of them trees, because can't have enough trees. Anyway, I want to conclude by talking about the modern implications of mercantilist economics. Now, most of mercantilism has been dispensed with. We have free markets and free trade today, of course. But its effects are still present, especially in the aforementioned economic oppression of workers, especially of those who are essential to the functioning of our economy. And I'm talking about those folks who work the hardest. I'm talking about migrant farmers, talking about warehouse workers, retail workers, teachers and adjunct professors, nurses, social workers, janitors, and so on. In fact, it seems that the harder your job and the more social and economic utility it has, the less you get paid, especially in non-union fields. Now, this doesn't make sense under the meritocratic system that we have now, or that we at least think we have now, but under a mercantilist system it makes perfect sense. Those whose jobs mean the most to society and to the economy have to be kept in a economically precarious situation to ensure they keep long hours and thus maximize their productivity. Now, this is obviously in reality preposterous. Folks burn out after spending 8 hours down in the spreadsheet mines or on the JavaScript farm, let alone doing back-breaking physical labor or heart-wrenching emotional labor. And this is why mercantilism was always a fundamentally broken system, one which produced huge numbers of trade wars, which frequently escalated into actual shooting wars. It enriched the few at the expense of the many, and its effects are still being felt to this day. Now, we will discuss some of these themes more thoroughly in the next episode, including mercantilism's effect on urban development, where we will talk about English colonialism and finally found the actual city of Franklin. Anyway, on to the cinematics.